Thank you. So good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you today. A real stage, a real room, real people, and real empty chairs at the front. So if you're standing at the back, don't hesitate to make use of them. Today, we're going to talk about current and future travel trends to Europe. There's been a lot of gloom and doom over the past almost 2.5 years, but the industry is finally starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And by the look of the scenes of chaos that we've seen in airports all across Europe, it seems that the strength of the rebound comes as a surprise. And it shouldn't. It shouldn't because we're equipped to go beyond the hunch and to use data to anticipate travel flows and make database decisions instead of always running after the facts and improvise. So our plan for today is to see how we can use data regarding air travel demand to understand the current status of travel demand in general. In case you're not familiar with ForwardKeys, just a few words about the company and the data that we use. We're a travel analytics company. We're based in Spain. And on the demand side, we're specialized in air travel, as you will have understood. On the supply side, we know which company is flying where and when, and we can monitor the scheduled capacity. On the demand side, we know who's looking for what flights, who's booking, and who's getting a ticket issued for when, where, and via what itinerary. So in short, we've managed to create a data-powered crystal ball that enables us to anticipate travel demand. And the best thing is that it works. We've been around for more than 12 years now. So what does the data say? I'd like to start with the big picture so that we can see how Europe fits in this world recovery that we're seeing. The first thing I'd like to stress is that the world recovery is a fact, but we're still very, very much behind 2019 levels. Here we're looking at the results for the first half of the year, January to June, and as you can see, we're still very, very much behind, even though there's been a strong acceleration of the recovery between Q1 and Q2. As you can see here, it's 16 percentage points better in Q2 than Q1. The truth is that this world average is not reflecting the reality. The reality is a travel world still split in two. On the one hand, we have the Asia-Pacific, where travel restrictions are still in place and recovery is weak. On the other hand, the rest of the world, which has freed itself from travel restrictions and which is making its way back to 2019 levels. You can see the range of the recovery for Q2. It's between -27% for the Americas and Europe at -33%. Please note that this includes Russia, Ukraine, and the Belarus for Europe. Now, if we zoom in on Europe and look at results by individual countries, we can see a clear pattern, which is that Southern Europe is recovering significantly strongly than the rest of the continent, and this already started in Q1. Now, unless you have eagle eyes, and in this case I envy you, you will not be able to read all the figures on this map. It doesn't matter. You can see that there's a lot of red in here, and that when we switch to Q2, it already starts looking better, although here again, we can see that Southern Europe is performing significantly better than the rest. We have Turkey already in the plus, meaning with more international arrivals than in 2019. Greece is only at -8%, Portugal -13%, Spain at -20%, again, results for Q2. So there is a clear recovery at play. Now, if we aggregate the results for all those countries and we look at things from a regional level, we can see again Southern Europe recovering much more strongly at -23% in total. The next in line is Northern Europe, still more than 10 percentage points behind. Then we've got Western Europe, which has made a big comeback, going from minus 60% in Q1 to minus 38%, and Central and Eastern Europe still reeling from the consequences of the war in Ukraine. So now that we're all clear on the big picture, let's focus on some trends which are shaping the recovery. And the first trend I would like to focus on is the strong rebound of the premium traveler segment. What do we mean by premium travelers? From our perspective, it's basically the people sitting at the front of the plane. And as you can see here, looking at bookings for the summer of 2022, we have a very strong reactivation of the premium segment, plus 15% compared with pre-pandemic, while economy is still lagging behind, minus 22%. These premium travelers, these are the guys we've been talking about for ages when talking about revenge travel. That's totally their thing. They tend to travel often, they tend to stay longer than in the past, and they tend to spend more, which means great business opportunities for the sector as a whole, but for the luxury segment in particular. The second trend I wanted to mention is the comeback of urban travel. Still lagging behind sun and beach destinations, which you can see here in orange, but still urban travel in blue is going back on track. And it's a segment that had been very severely hit by COVID. Understandably, people didn't feel like visiting crowded museums and closed spaces or being shoulder to shoulder with strangers in the narrow streets of the city centers. These fears are finally disappearing progressively, and urban tourism is back, which is going to boost sales for museums and for cultural attractions. Business travel, next in line. We've heard a lot of talks about business travel being dead, killed by Zoom meetings and online conferences. Clearly, the data shows that this is not the case. Yes, for a long time, business travel has been lagging behind leisure, but we can still see this clear recovery trend. And even though we're not back to 2019 levels, we have already the bulk of business travel back on track, which is a great piece of news. The moment of truth will be, of course, September, October, which is typically high season for this segment. Now, when preparing this presentation, we had a chat with the organizers, and one of the things they really wanted to know is whether transatlantic travel was still going strong, because there is some serious headwinds. Inflation, for one thing. We're also seeing, well, for most of the period we've analyzed, there were still some serious travel restrictions in place. And the question was if this impacted transatlantic travel in both directions. Because given the fluctuations in exchange rates, the US was getting increasingly expensive for Europeans. What we can see is that pent-up demand on transatlantic routes is so strong that we're not seeing any slowdown of the regarding the recovery of these routes. Travel from US to the EU, which you can see here in yellow, is still going up. It's actually even above 2019 levels since the month of April. Tickets from the EU to the US are also up. Those are the tickets that you can see in the line in red here. And in blue, you can see the evolution of exchange rates. So even though the US is more expensive for Europeans, they still book their trip to the US and North America in general. So enough about the past, let's talk about the future, and we start with the summer. How is the summer going to look like? Well, it looks pretty good. We're only 18% behind compared with 2019 levels, which was the top year, as you will remember, and we can see that recovery is accelerating. Only a month ago, mid-May, bookings were still 26% behind. So you can see this strong acceleration, and what's worrying is that we see a growing number of operators not being able to keep pace with this recovery, hence the issues that I've mentioned at the beginning with airports, but It's really across the whole travel ecosystem that we find these issues. Bookings are doing great. Travel intent remains strong. Here we're looking at all searches for flights take place this summer. You can see in gray, yes, you can still see it, the evolution of searches still going up. I've decided to highlight two markets which I found particularly interesting. The UK, because it's been consistently overperforming, and Gulf countries, which have waited for their own travel restrictions to be lifted before going up. Intra-European travel remains stronger than long haul. It's not a surprise. We're still missing some key markets like China. Japan has hardly reactivated. We're still missing a number of biggies, and that explains why long haul is still behind. And in terms of booking behaviors and traveler profile, really, apart from a slight tendency to stay longer than in 2019 and a bit more families, there's no major change compared with 2019, which is great because it means that we're slowly going back to normality. Looking at the key markets that have reactivated the most for the summer, we can see a very northern European picture with Denmark, Sweden, the UK, Germany, and Norway being all ahead in terms of bookings compared with 2019, a great piece of news. And in terms of destinations, it's something that's still very much in line with what we've seen during the first half of the year. Turkey and Greece still leading the way, but this time with both very strong positive figures compared with 2019, and a little surprise here with Iceland, which is not exactly your typical sun and sea destination, or sun and beach, but which is strongly benefiting from the dynamism of the US market. Sorry, looking at cities, it's very much the same. Southern European cities being strong, and Reykjavik being there as well for the reasons that I have just mentioned. Now, the question you may ask is, if demand is there, what about the supply? How are things going from this end? If the supply cannot keep up with demand, then we end up with a bottleneck, and we're losing business opportunities at a time when we most need them. The bad piece of news is that capacity, and here I take the example of US to Europe, capacity is still down compared with 2019. We all know the reason. There are some difficulties to operate all the flights. But we can also see that airlines are betting on certain routes, because routes from the US to Southern Europe are up in terms of capacity compared with 2019, which means that airlines, which are really cash hungry at the moment, they're really betting on those routes where the demand will be the strongest, and that puts destination in a tough situation because they will really, really need to rebuild their air capacity if they want to stay in the race compared with these Southern European destinations. Here we focus on the trips from the bookings from the USA to Greece in red and the USA to Portugal in blue, and you can see a strong rebound in terms of booking, way above 2019 levels, which is linked to capacity, while for the UK, the rebound is a bit weaker because there are less capacity, and the UK is not exactly known as the best place to get a suntan. So in terms of most resilient cities for the US, it's a lot of destinations in Southern Europe, Istanbul, Lisbon, Athens. I'm going quick on this because I only have 1 minute left, and I want to talk about the second half of the year. Big picture is not that encouraging. Bookings are still very much behind 2019 levels, both for Q3 and for Q4. I think this comes from a wait-and-see attitude from a lot of travelers who are waiting for the summer to be gone to really focus on what's next. If I take my own case, for example, I've got plenty of trips in the pipeline for after the summer, and I haven't booked any because I want to see how the situation will look like once July and August are gone. In terms of capacity, there's no increase to be expected from airlines on the short term, both for domestic, intra-European, and long-haul flights. We know that they're struggling already to keep up with the current demand. We expect to see a dip from October on, which is when the winter season kicks in, and there are already some signs that scheduled capacity will increase by the end of the year to accommodate for the Christmas holidays, and we may expect that by that time, airlines are really back on track. They've got the staff that's needed to make sure that this ski season is a success. I'd like to finish with a success story, or a positive story at least. There's one moment when we see a strong reactivation of demand, and that's the UK holidays for the autumn break, where we can see that for some countries, France, Portugal, Iceland, Turkey, they've made a head start. People are already booking. Booking levels are superior to 2019 levels, meaning that if you're wondering when to start promoting these destinations and do business on the UK market during the autumn break, the time is probably now already, so keep that in mind. 4 key takeaways I would like to let you with before we close. The first one is that international travel to Europe has reactivated and the recovery is accelerating, which leads me to point number 2, which is that the summer outlook looks good, especially for sun and sea destinations. We're also seeing the high end of the market reactivating strongly, which offers good business opportunities, especially on the luxury segment. And the other great piece of news is that business travel is coming back, and we expect, again, this moment of truth, which will be September and October, to be a successful one. Thank you very much for your attention, and don't hesitate to connect with me to keep in touch with the latest travel trends. Thank you.